What's up guys, I'm Josh and welcome to my video on making Ed, Edd and Eddy realistic-ish with CGI and VFX. A quick breakdown of the process and workflow behind my character builds and animations. This definitely isn't a tutorial because I really don't know what I'm doing, but at the very least it's probably a walkthrough of what not to do. After my last project, Dexter's Laboratory, I decided to make another one of my favourite childhood shows realistic and maybe a bit boring. So I started watching a bunch of episodes of Ed, Edd and Eddy for inspiration. And it was definitely for inspiration, and not because I, as someone very quickly approaching 30, actually spent a lot of my time rewatching cartoons from when I was a kid in a clear attempt to pretend I'm not getting old. For the characters, I wasn't totally sure where to start. They all have very strange shapes. Eddy's head is about as wide as his whole body, and he has no neck. Ed's head is sort of triangle shaped, and he doesn't really have a chin, and Double D has a pretty square head with a really thin neck. But I learned from my realistic Dexter project that it's better to just sort of go with how they could look in 3D than make it exactly how they would be based on the cartoon, because if you do that, they start to look really creepy. So I jumped into Real Illusion's character creator, which feels very similar to a character creation section in a video game, where you use modifiers and sliders to change things like body size and facial features, and you can pick a bunch of different clothes. I started with Eddy and just began making him a little chunky and small, and giving him as big and wide a head as possible that still made sense. Then to keep in sort of proportions of the cartoon, I gave him a small nose and bigger rounder eyes. I found I had to keep in mind how the other characters were going to look at this point, because if I pushed Eddy too far in any direction, I had to remember that Ed was taller and slimmer with less of a neck, Double D has smaller ears and that sort of thing, so if I made anything too extreme on Eddy, it might end up pushing the other characters into that creepy territory. For Eddy's hair, I tried making bald because he just has those 3 hairs in the show, but it didn't quite look right. I then tried giving him this sort of slick back thin hair that just made him look like he had old man hair. So I eventually settled on this slick back side fade kind of look, which sort of felt like something he might have if he was around now. Once I got him to the right point, I exported him from Character Creator and did my last edits in Blender, like smoothing out some of the details and resculpting some parts, and I edited the clothes textures in Photoshop. All that really involved was making the t-shirt yellow with the red stripe and the purple sections, and making his jeans a little bit more blue to match the cartoon. After I'd added the chain to his jeans, I was pretty quickly at a point I was happy with. What I think took him up a notch was editing the skin texture to be a bit pinker everywhere except around the eyes, to give him that sort of sunglasses sunburn look from the original show. Next I moved on to Ed, and to keep him feeling kind of similar, I just copied Eddy and worked from that as a base. I gave him a shaved head and spent a lot of time working on the neck and head shape. I tried for a while to make it all kind of one continuous shape, where the jawline just led into the neck, but it didn't look very realistic, so instead I just went for the general idea of that triangular shape and something that felt sort of correct, and hoped that I could bring in as much of the character as possible with the eyebrows and his mouth. The brows were interesting as I wanted to give him the monobrow from the show, but again he just looked a bit weird and creepy, so I made his regular brows as big and bushy as I could, and I brought them as low down as I could without making him look angry. After putting that together, doing some edits in Blender and altering the colours to better match the show, I moved on to Double D. Double D was who I had the most trouble with, and to be totally honest is the one I'm still not that happy with. And I think that comes down to him just kind of looking a bit too cool, or at least compared to the original show. He really ended up looking like this stoner skater kind of guy, which wasn't intentional. I started from scratch with Double D twice, but just ended up in this same sort of place. I had quite a lot of trouble with Double D, I think because the clothes are pretty simple, where Eddy and Ed have quite distinctive clothes that helps them feel like the characters. Double D just has a simple pair of shorts and a t-shirt on, as well as a really wide square head and a very thin neck. But I think in the end I kind of got somewhere close. I think. I sort of hid Double D in both animations, where I just have him looking down at his phone to kind of hide that I didn't do a great job with him. After I'd built the characters, it was time to move on to the scenes. Before I really knew what I was going to animate for Ed, Edd and Eddy, I knew that one of the scenes had to involve jawbreakers, or gobstoppers as we call them here in the UK, both very weird names for something we're supposed to want to eat. I started with the still render I made for Eddy that I knew would have him in the foreground looking like he's in the middle of some kind of scheme, and a giant pile of jawbreakers behind him. So for that I posed Eddy and got this grocery fruit display stand from Kitbash 3D's Neighborhood Stores kit, and scaled it up, and I swapped the material of the oranges for the jawbreakers. The jawbreaker material is made from a Ryan King tutorial, which is really simple to follow and gets you a material where you can change the colours, texture and size of the markings. Building that scene and dialing in the materials and lighting and making his little sort of wooden desk that looks sort of like something from the show helped me kind of just expand on that idea for the first animation. I built out Eddy's desk into a little sort of shack, added a sign making it clear it wasn't a scam. I took the background and lighting setup from the main render I was working on with Ed, Edd and Eddy in front of the fence, and just animated it so Eddy was kind of sitting there looking like he was up to something. Double D would walk past on his phone, and Ed would be carrying in a giant jawbreaker. Once it was rendered, I added some audio, some camera shake, motion blur, altered the colours a bit, and it was good to go. When I was rewatching Ed, Edd and Eddy, I saw the hide and seek episode, and I remembered how cool I thought that was as a kid, and to be honest, I still think it's really cool. The perfect hide and seek spot that had loads of snacks inside. So after rewatching that, I got to work on making an updated version. I started with a bunch of wooden frames and metal panels from the Kitbash 3D Favela kit, and built out this sort of small enclosed area. Once I'd done that, I threw in a sofa and a giant TV, because I figured it would be much easier to animate them just sat watching TV than to show them eating all these snacks. So that was a bit of a cheat, but I wanted to make the hideout have a bit more to it anyway. Adding all these leaves sort of sticking through here and there helped make the scene feel a bit smaller and emphasize the scene from the cartoon that I was sort of remaking. I put in a PS1 in there as well, as it was the top games console in 1999, the year Ed, Edd and Eddy started. Then I just added in the characters with some pretty simple animations of them just sat watching the TV, or in Double D's case, sat looking down at his phone. And then I got to work adding the snacks. This was a combination of a bunch of assets I already had from different projects, some I made from scratch, and some new ones that I bought just for this. And after thinking I was finished a few times, only to realise I needed to add way more junk and snacks to the scene, I eventually got there. I still think there could probably be more on the floor around them, but I tried a few versions where there was a lot more and it just got a bit distracting. And your eye didn't really know where to go, whereas I think this version of it, you kind of look at them and then look at the snacks around them. I animated the light on the TV to go up and down in intensity, which I varied a bit more once it was rendered to make it look like something was really on the screen. I added in some audio, camera shake, motion blur, and changed the colours a bit, and it was good to go. This was another really fun project to put together, and a good follow-up to my Dexter project that was thankfully a bit simpler and didn't involve any giant robot fight scenes. And even though there's a few things I'd change, and I'd probably still be working on making Double D look a bit more nerdy, I'm pretty happy with how everything ended up. If you've got any questions, put them in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. And for more shorts like realistic Ed, Edd and Eddy and breakdowns like this, be sure to like and subscribe.